Four nations are facing off, and the first game of the tournament took place last night between Canada and Sweden, and Canada reigned victorious with a 4-3 victory over the Swedes. It did take overtime, and the game looked like it was going to be a lot more lopsided than it really was, but this was a pretty fun game. I think great start to the tournament for both nations. For the Canadians and the Swedes, we'll get into what the takeaways are from this game later. Let me recap things a little bit for you in case you didn't watch. So things started off real quick for Canada. They drew a penalty and then immediately rolled out the greatest power play unit in the history of power plays with Sidney Crosby, Nathan MacKinnon, Connor McDavid, Cale Makar, and Sam Reinhart. Cale Makar to Connor McDavid to Sidney Crosby to Nathan MacKinnon. That equals goal if you're doing the math at home. Really nice pass from Sidney Crosby on his backhand, just spins, and I'm not entirely sure how Sweden left not only Nathan MacKinnon, but that entire passing lane open. They kind of left Sidney Crosby open too. But either way, Canada got the lead nice and early, less than a minute in. Things just kind of kept rolling for Canada. They kind of dominated the rest of the first period. They get another goal off the rush, Braden Point to Brad Marchand. You know, a few fan favorites in Montreal getting the crowd going. It was just a pretty nice play. They just kind of skated by it for plenty, and it was a nice pass from Point, and Marchand just happened to finish. Then things kind of geared down in the second period. Sweden found their groove a little bit, found their five-man game, worked the cycle, and they got their first goal of the tournament, first goal of the game on Jordan Binnington. Hadn't really been tested up to this point, and you have to wonder why, considering this goal. I understand that there's a little bit of a screen from Rickard Rakell. A lot of people are we're talking about that. I really don't think it's that much of an issue as people are making it out to be. I think it's just a not very good goal, but you know, when it's one goal, it's fine. It's just not good enough from Binnington, and that's kind of their issue. The concern that everybody has moving forward with Team Canada. But Canada was able to bounce back pretty well. Sidney Crosby would get another nice little backhand assist, fought off Gustav Forsling, and again, Sweden just kind of left Mark Stone wide open. Rasmus Dahlin and Mika Zibanejad just were kind of in between covering him. Neither of them really covered him. Each one thought the other person was getting at him, and they didn't. And he was left wide open and snuck it between Philip Gustafsson's legs. And that was kind of the end of the second period. It was a pretty slow one. I think both teams were it was a little bit of a rock fight, which favored Sweden a little bit. Then in the third period, Sweden really gained their mojo and started fighting back. They got a few chances early and were able to capitalize. Adrian Kempe buried one, took advantage of a pretty weak gap from Drew Doughty on the rush, fired on between his legs, and another not great goal from Jordan Binnington. Then things kept rolling for Sweden. They would get another goal. Jesper Bratt would turn Colton Parayko inside out in front of the net. Kind of got left there all by himself, but definitely bit pretty hard on Bratt's fake shot. So did Jordan Binnington, which allowed Bratt to slide the puck over to Joel Eriksson Ek. Ek had a wide open net, but he roofed it anyways, just, to really put the exclamation point on the goal, and things were tied. After that, Canada did kind of seem to dial things up a little bit more. It was pretty much mostly them once the game was tied. I think they kind of got woken up a little bit. Javon Toews and Cale Makar both had a few chances. Toews with the better of the chances, but Gustafsson made a pretty nice save on him to keep things tied and send us into overtime, where things started pretty slow. It was a pretty slow start to the overtime. Team Canada started Marner, McDavid, and Makar, and then Nathan MacKinnon stepped on the ice, and things got electric. Now it's a bit of a heated conversation lately because people think McKinnon's approach to overtime wasn't the best. Not sure I can agree. Obviously, I'm a little biased here, but I also feel like I've seen some other hockey people thinking that it's just silly. I think it's mostly just Oilers fans being salty that their guy didn't really take over as much, but, whatever. Eventually, Canada had a few flurries of chances. Sweden even got a few odd man chances that Binnington made some nice stops on, and then Canada would bury it thanks to Mitch Marner showing up in a big game for the Maple Leafs. The Canadians. Whoops. Well, not the Canadians, but you get it. Yeah, pretty funny. Kind of funny timing. One thing I did think was really interesting about this play, and I think a lot of people didn't notice, is that Sidney Crosby did not mean to pass it to Mitch Marner, which makes a lot of sense considering Sidney Crosby was at the blue line and Mitch Marner was way back behind the circle. But you can tell there's a replay where he looks over to his right by the Canada bench. Devon Toews coming on from the Canada bench is cutting over. He's totally dropping that pass to him, but Taves slows down a little bit and isn't able to catch it. So he kind of just lets it go, and Marner takes it. I just think that was really funny. Just like kind of funny how that worked. Like it worked like out to be like the perfect slingshot play, but it wasn't intentional at all. I don't know, just something funny I kind of noticed on the replay there. Getting into this game, the takeaways are what you kind of think. Canada, very skilled. Goalie, not very good. And the bottom half of their defense didn't do great. Didn't help that Shea Theodore got hurt early on. He's a big two-way defender for them. They kind of had to rely on Cale Makar and Devontae's a lot. They both played close to over 25 minutes, way more than anyone else. The only people who really got close was Josh Morrissey. Didn't really notice much of him. Colton Parayko was probably their third best defender, I would say. He had that big mistake on the third goal, but he also kind of got lost in coverage there. It was just a whole thing. I can see where they're coming from with Colton Parayko. He definitely brings a different presence to that group. I think he can do some solid stuff. He just has to be a little bit smarter with the puck sometimes. But really the issue is the goaltending. It wasn't horrific. None of the goals are like, geesh. Like he's not like letting in like floaters, from the point. Like at least there was a screen on the Brodin one. It's a decent shot from Kempe through the screen of Doughty. So it's like whatever. But at the same time, 3 goals on 20-some shots just isn't going to cut it, especially, when your team is that good. You're not really seeing a whole lot. Whereas for, the other side, Sweden, Gustafsson made a few big saves. The overtime goal isn't great, but it's also like a rocket. And then the other goals are just really nice. Like he's getting no support from his defense on any of those. The same can't be said for Binnington. In terms of Canadian forwards, I thought they were pretty good. I don't really have a big issue. I think that they should switch some things up, though, based on my little viewing. Obviously, it's a 4-game tournament, so, if you're going to switch things up, you might as well do it now. But Connor McDavid, Sam Reinhart, and Mitch Marner were okay as a line, but they didn't seem to vibe well together. And kind of the same thing for MacKinnon, Stone, and Crosby. Obviously, the other lines had a little bit more of a, I guess identity. They found their way a little bit. But I really think what the problem with the MacKinnon, Crosby, Stone line is just a lack of speed. Crosby isn't as fast as he used to be, and Mark Stone just isn't fast at all. Watching him skate was terrible. It was the worst thing I've ever seen. He looks like on either side, he was by far their worst skater. And playing with Nathan MacKinnon, that just doesn't work. You have to have someone like Mikko Rantanen wasn't a great skater, but he could play with speed well. Mark Stone could not play with speed well. He can't do it. Sidney Crosby, I could see it, but I think instead of Stone, they need to put someone like a Point. I really would like to see Nathan MacKinnon and Braden Point, because Point is just a really, really speedy winger, and he's got a nice scoring touch for that line, which is good because MacKinnon and Crosby can be distributors at times. For the whole McDavid thing, I'm not entirely sure. I could definitely see where they're going with McDavid and Marner, but they just couldn't vibe. I don't know. Reinhart was just not very good the entire game. He was kind of a non-factor. So there's an interesting thing to go off with him. Where do they place him in the lineup? Other than that, I really just don't think that there's a whole lot to go off for Canada here. The conversation with MacKinnon in overtime, I'll say, is silly. There was the instance where there was a 2-on-1 with him and McDavid, and McDavid took just terrible. It was some of the worst 2-on-1 second man play I've ever seen. He's not engaged in the play. He floats himself way out of position, and he's standing straight up. He's not even ready for anything to happen, right? And some were saying that he's trying to draw Ekholm off, but I don't think what he really needs to be doing, instead of just floating super wide, is he has to be like cutting in maybe and then start to float wide a little bit. You can't just bait someone by just baiting them. You have to like actually get them enticed and then take them, I don't know. Seeing people complain about that is just so funny to me, considering Nathan MacKinnon was, I think objectively by far the most fun part of that overtime. Nathan MacKinnon injected so much life into it. He was just taking it to it. He could have scored a few goals, honestly. He was pretty close. I do think the other issue is Connor McDavid was just not following up plays. The only guy who's as fast as Nathan MacKinnon, and he's just not joining him on the rush regularly. It was very weird. But it was a good game. for the Canadians. For Sweden, I also thought it was a pretty good game. I think what really screwed them was the early penalty, and they just took too long to get their feet under them. A 2-goal lead is hard to chase. If they had kind of gotten the first one, I could see them pulling away with it, but they kind of screwed themselves a little bit. Going into 3-on-3 against Canada was never going to work out for Sweden, barring a total collapse. It just wasn't going to work. So they really have to work on doing that 5-man game earlier, because my thing with Sweden in this tournament is that they don't have the superstars that any other team does. Their best player is Philip Forsberg, and that's cool, but he's just not the same caliber as Nathan MacKinnon, Sidney Crosby, Connor McDavid, Cale Makar, Austin Matthews, Jack Hughes. I would have been better if there was like Quinn Hughes, but Jack Eichel, Matthew Tkachuk, Alexander Barkov, Mikko Rantanen. I think that's where they will struggle in the future games, is that they just don't have the star power to compete with all these other teams, right? So they need to play the connected 5-man unit game as a 5-man unit from the jump. And when they failed, it was when they weren't playing as a 5-man unit. They're only the overtime goal was the only one they really defended well, right? They only properly defended that one play of all the goals that went in. Other than that, it was really loose. There were guys wide open. It was just they have to be better defensively. It's kind of the same thing with them and Finland. Finland is a little bit of a different boat just because of their pure lack of defense. Their defenders are very good at defending, but not much else. So it's going to be interesting for Sweden. And for Sweden, the goaltenders are good. I'm sure we'll see Ullmark in the next game or at some point. I don't think Gustafsson played bad, but I don't think they're good enough to really they would have to get hot to steal them a game. I'm not counting on it, especially with Gustafsson kind of slowing down in the regular season lately, and Ullmark coming back from injury. That's really where things are going to kind of trail off for them. Now, in terms of 3 stars of the game, as we always do, it's going to be hard for me not to separate things too much from what they did in the real game. But I'm actually gonna put Gustafsson at third. I think he made some really good saves. He kept Sweden in it for most of the game. I'm gonna give the second star to Mitch Marner for the OT winner, and then obviously Sidney Crosby. 3 assists on the backhand in pure Sidney Crosby style. I don't really even think Sidney Crosby played that well, but he just got the assist and he showed up when it mattered. I think there's a lot to be made. There was a lot to be made of Sidney Crosby and Connor McDavid. I didn't really think either of them were that good. I really didn't think Nathan MacKinnon was very good either, to be completely honest. Canada had their moments as a unit, but they didn't really have a lot of, no one really took over the game for them except for Crosby, but he didn't really take over the game. He kind of had one of those Mikko Rantanen nights where he just kind of produces, but he didn't play super well, but he played well. I don't know. It's hard to explain. I think they have some line jumbling to do. At some point, I would really love to see McKinnon, and Crosby would be fun, but no, Marchand, MacKinnon, and Crosby just for the Nova Scotia love. That'd be fun. Also, watching McDavid, MacKinnon, and Makar in overtime was electric. I'm shocked they weren't the ones that scored it, to be completely honest with you. I think Canada has their good chances, but they have to not let teams in games, and their goaltending has to be better. And they also need better from their defense. Sanheim, I think, could help a little bit, but he's still kind of, I don't know. Sanheim, Doughty, and Parayko are a little bit repetitive. Josh Morrissey, I think, is really the black sheep of this defensive group because he provides a lot of his value in his offensive game, but he's not running power play 1. He's not their first offensive choice. That's Cale Makar. It'll be interesting to see how he fits in. At least the other guys have shut down kind of bottom pairing defensive roles. Morrissey's a little bit more interesting. But I definitely think things will be interesting going forward. I think Sweden could cause some fits, but like I said, without that star power, it's going to be tough for them to get past at least USA. They might get past Finland. The Sweden-Finland game is definitely one that I'm looking forward to. Obviously, I think everyone is. But I think this was a good game. Nathan MacKinnon got the first goal of the tournament. Real nice. Happy about that. We'll see what the other teams have in store for us with Finland and USA kicking it off tonight. Got coverage for you on that one too. We'll see you guys in the next one.